Ladies and gentlemen, brokenness is the birthplace of purpose. It is in the moments when a man is shattered, stripped of pride, humbled by pain, and brought to his knees that his true purpose begins to take shape. Most people run from brokenness. They think it is a sign of failure, a curse, or a punishment, but in reality it is often God's greatest tool. It is in the fire that gold is refined. It is through the storm that the seed takes root. And it is in the breaking that the man becomes who he was meant to be. When life falls apart, when dreams crumble and plans fail, something deeper begins to awaken. That awakening does not come when everything is perfect. It comes when everything is falling apart, because in that chaos, when control is lost, a man learns to surrender, and in surrender he begins to see beyond himself. He starts to understand that life is not just about achievement, power, or recognition. It is about purpose, a deeper, divine calling that often cannot be found on the mountaintop, but only in the valley. Every great man in history, every name we remember not just for what they did, but for who they became, walked through brokenness. Moses was broken in the desert, David was broken in the cave, Joseph was broken in the pit, Paul was broken in prison, even Jesus himself was broken on the cross, and from that breaking came the power, the mission, the transformation that touched the world. The man who has never been broken is often still full of himself, still full of pride, of illusion, of thinking he can do it all alone. But the man who has been broken knows that strength is not in avoiding pain, but in walking through it with faith. He understands that brokenness does not weaken the spirit, it awakens it. When God breaks a man, he breaks the parts that were never meant to last, the ego, the arrogance, the false identity, the illusion of control. He breaks the comfort zones, the dependencies, the shallow foundations, and in their place he begins to build something stronger, something rooted, something eternal, but that building does not happen overnight. It begins in the ruins, in the silence, in the long nights of wrestling, doubting, praying, and waiting. It happens when the man has nothing left to lean on but God, when he says, "I can't," and finally means it. That's when God steps in and says, "Good, now I can." Purpose is not found in comfort. It's not found in applause. It's found in the wilderness, in the crushing, in the pruning. That is where a man discovers who he really is. That is where the mask comes off, where the noise fades, and where the still, small voice of God becomes clear. That voice doesn't shout, it whispers. But in the breaking, a man finally hears it. He hears that he was made for more. That his pain is not wasted, that his journey, no matter how painful, is part of a divine design. God never breaks a man to leave him broken. He breaks him to rebuild him, to repurpose him, to realign him. And often it is in the breaking that the man realizes his greatest strength was never his talent, his connections, or his confidence. His greatest strength is his dependence, dependence on a higher power. Dependence on grace, dependence on something deeper than self. That dependence births clarity, vision, resilience, the raw materials of purpose. Too many people pray for purpose, but run from the process. They want the calling without the crushing. They want the crown without the cross, but it doesn't work that way, because purpose is not cheap. It costs everything, and the first payment is often brokenness. That's the entry point. That's the passage. That's where you learn that God is not just trying to use you, He's trying to transform you. Not just for a moment, but for a mission. Not just to bless you, but to make you a blessing. There is a kind of wisdom that only comes from wounds, a kind of vision that only comes after tears, a kind of authority that only comes after being crushed. That's why broken men often speak with power. Not because they are perfect, but because they are real. They've been through it, they've survived what should have taken them out, and in that survival they gained something more precious than comfort, they gained clarity. The clarity that life is not random, that pain has purpose, that even in the darkest moments, God is still working, still shaping, still breaking and building at the same time. So when a man is broken, it is not the end. It is often the beginning, not the death of his destiny, but the birth of it, because in that broken state the noise dies down, the distractions fade, and what's real begins to surface, his voice, his truth. His calling, his purpose, and though he may limp from that breaking, like Jacob after wrestling with God, he walks with a new name, a new identity, a new strength. One that doesn't come from avoiding the storm, but from surviving it with a purpose that's now carved into his soul. God breaks not to destroy, but to prepare. This truth is often misunderstood because the process of breaking feels like loss, failure, or punishment. But God does not operate on human logic. His ways are higher, and his methods are designed not for harm, but for healing. When he breaks a man, he is not throwing him away, he is stripping away what no longer serves the man's calling. The breaking is not about tearing down for the sake of damage. It is about tearing down to rebuild something greater, something eternal. Preparation is often hidden inside pain. The man who is being prepared by God is not always aware of it in the moment. All he sees is disappointment, hardship, confusion, doors closing, people walking away, plans falling apart. But behind all of it, God is at work. He is setting the stage, refining the character, reshaping the heart. Because God is not only concerned with what a man does, he is deeply concerned with who a man becomes. And in order to become who he's meant to be, there are things that must be broken off: pride, fear, ego, selfish ambition. These things cannot be carried into the future God has planned, so he breaks the man, not to ruin him, but to ready him. Preparation through breaking is not glamorous. It is often done in private, no applause, no recognition, just long nights, silent prayers, and seasons that feel like isolation. But it is in those hidden moments that the foundation is laid, a foundation not built on talent or charm, but on surrender and obedience. God does not prepare men by giving them comfort. He prepares them by giving them challenges, because challenge shapes character, and character is what sustains purpose. Without preparation, the weight of the calling would crush the man. So God in his mercy begins to prepare through pressure, through trials, through the very things that seem like setbacks, but are actually setups. The man who has been broken and prepared by God walks differently. He carries a humility that cannot be faked, a quiet strength that comes from being tested, a deeper trust in God because he's seen what happens when everything else fails. That trust isn't built in success, it's built in survival. When a man has been through the breaking, he learns to stop fighting for control and starts learning how to follow. And it is in that following that true preparation is completed, because before a man can lead others, he must learn how to be led. Before he can carry influence, he must first carry the weight of surrender. God's preparation is not limited to spiritual lessons. It affects every part of life. Sometimes the breaking happens in relationships to teach love without attachment. Sometimes it happens in careers to teach purpose beyond position. Sometimes it happens in health to teach dependence beyond strength. Each breaking is unique, but the goal is always the same: transformation. God is not interested in surface success. He is interested in depth, in integrity, in authenticity, and to reach those things the man must be prepared through fire. The fire does not come to burn the man up. It comes to burn away what does not belong, the false identities, the hidden idols, the quiet compromises. These things cannot go into the future. So God, in love, allows the fire, and though it hurts, it heals. Though it burns, it blesses, because in the fire the man is purified, not perfect, but purified, ready to be used, ready to serve, ready to walk in what he was always meant for, but couldn't handle before the breaking. This kind of preparation is not quick, it is not convenient, but it is effective. It goes deep. It rewrites how a man sees himself, how he sees others, and how he sees God. After the breaking, he no longer depends on the world's approval. He no longer measures himself by success or applause. He learns to be content with obscurity if that's where God places him, because he understands that preparation is sacred, even if it is unseen, and in that sacred space he is equipped not just with skills, but with wisdom. Not just with knowledge, but with discernment. These are the marks of a man who has been broken not to be discarded, but to be deployed. God is not looking for polished men, he is looking for prepared men. Men who have wrestled with doubt, with fear, with failure, and have come out with a deeper dependence on him. Men who don't speak from theory, but from testimony. Men who have scars, but also stories. Men who have been on the edge of giving up, but stayed because God held them together when everything else fell apart. That kind of man doesn't need to pretend. He doesn't need to perform, because he knows who he is. And more importantly, he knows who God is, not just in glory, but in grief, not just in triumph, but in trial. So when God breaks a man, it is not a sign that he is done with him. It is often the clearest sign that he is just beginning. Because God doesn't waste pain, he repurposes it. He turns brokenness into preparation. He turns weakness into strength. He turns emptiness into space for something new. The weight of the calling requires the strength of the crushed. This is a truth that few understand until they have walked through the crushing themselves. Many admire the calling, the platform, the influence, the voice, the anointing, but few understand what it costs to carry that calling. God does not place heavy callings on light foundations. He does not assign divine missions to untested vessels. The greater the calling, the greater the crushing, because only through pressure does the strength required to sustain that calling begin to form. There is a misconception that calling is glamorous, that to be chosen by God is to be elevated, celebrated, and admired. But before any elevation comes the crushing. Before the crown there is always a cross. The weight of what God places on a person's life is not just about impact, it is about endurance. The man who has been crushed knows how to endure. He has walked through fire and did not quit. He has been rejected, misunderstood, and broken, yet he did not let bitterness take root. That endurance becomes the backbone of the calling. Without it, the man would crumble under pressure, give in to pride, or collapse at the first sign of resistance. Crushing produces capacity. It expands what a man can hold spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. God allows the crushing not to diminish the man, but to deepen him, to stretch his spirit so it can carry more weight, to stretch his heart so it can hold more compassion, to stretch his faith so it can stand when circumstances make no sense. The calling of God is not light. It demands patience, wisdom, humility, and relentless obedience, and those things are not developed in comfort. They are forged in crushing. The man who has never been crushed may carry charisma, but he does not yet carry weight. He may speak with confidence, but his words lack authority, because true authority comes from surviving what others did not. It comes from walking through crushing seasons and emerging with scars that tell a story. Those scars become silent sermons. They speak of endurance, of trust, of surrender, and those who carry the weight of a true calling don't wear their scars as signs of shame, but as proof that they have been prepared. God often crushes before he releases. The oil does not flow from the olive until the olive is pressed. The fragrance does not rise from the incense until it is burned. The wine does not pour from the grape until it is crushed. And the anointing that rests on a man's life will not emerge until he has been through that crushing process. The crushing is not glamorous. It is lonely. It is silent. It is painful, but it is essential. Because through it, God produces something in the man that cannot be imitated or manufactured: inner strength. The kind that does not break when the spotlight fades or when the storm hits. The kind that remains rooted in truth when lies surround him. The crushing teaches the man how to carry burdens that do not belong to him, because part of the calling is intercession, carrying others, praying for others, weeping for others. The man who has been crushed can feel what others feel. He has been acquainted with sorrow, so he knows how to walk with the broken. He does not judge their pain because he has sat in it. He does not rush their healing because he knows what it means to wait. That empathy is not weakness, it is strength. The strength of the crushed becomes the sanctuary for the weary. His life becomes a refuge, not because he has answers, but because he has endurance. The strength developed in the crushing is not loud. It is not boastful, it is quiet, it is steady, it is the kind of strength that stands when others fall, the kind that keeps showing up when everything inside says to give up, the kind that prays when there's no breakthrough, trusts when there's no clarity, and obeys when there's no applause. That strength does not come from books, it comes from battles. It comes from the hidden places where only God and the man know the weight being carried, and that secrecy is part of the crushing, because God will often hide the man while he breaks him. The crushing happens in obscurity, so that pride has no room to grow. People see the calling, but they don't see the cost. They hear the message, but they don't see the midnight tears. They celebrate the results, but they don't understand the resistance it took to get there. But God sees it all, and he knows that the man who will carry his weight must be willing to be crushed by his hand, not because God is cruel, but because he is careful. He knows what the future holds. He knows the battles ahead, so he strengthens his vessels now, in private, through pressure, through pruning, through pain, so that when the calling comes in full, the man will not be overwhelmed by it. The crushing doesn't just build strength, it removes weakness. It confronts every hidden fear, every fragile motive, every dependency that could become a snare. It forces the man to find his strength not in himself, but in God alone. That dependency becomes his anchor, that strength becomes his testimony, and that crushing becomes the secret chamber where the calling is not only confirmed but consecrated. Every breaking is a making in disguise. What looks like the end is often the beginning. What feels like defeat is often the foundation of destiny. The moments that shatter us are the same moments that shape us. God does not allow breaking without purpose. Behind every painful chapter, there is a process of becoming. A deeper strength is being formed, a deeper truth is being revealed, a deeper version of the man is emerging, one that could not exist without the breaking. The making is hidden in the mess. When life falls apart, when identity is stripped, when security vanishes, it may seem like everything is being lost, but in God's hands nothing is wasted. The breaking is not random. It is precise. It reaches the parts of us that comfort cannot touch. It reaches into our assumptions, our attachments, our illusions, and it tears them apart not to hurt us, but to heal us, not to shame us, but to reshape us. Because the man who is made through breaking is not the same as the man who was never tested. He carries something different, he walks differently, he speaks differently. His presence is not built on personality, it is built on pressure. When God begins to break a man, he is digging deep. He is removing layers that life, culture, and even religion may have placed there, layers of pride, layers of performance, layers of fear and false strength. All of it must go, because what God is making is not superficial. He is not making a showman, he is making a servant. He is not building a brand, he is building a life that reflects his glory. And to do that, he breaks. The breaking is the demolition before the construction. It is the cutting before the healing. It is the silence before the sound. The making often looks like isolation. Friends drift away, plans fall through. Doors close, the man is left in a space where nothing makes sense, and yet everything is being redefined. That isolation is not abandonment, it is incubation. It is the space where God works in secret. Where character is formed without applause, where faith is tested without reward, where obedience is required without understanding, in that place the man is not being punished, he is being prepared. The making cannot happen in the crowd. It requires the cave, the quiet, the uncertainty, because it is there that the inner man is confronted and changed. Every great transformation in Scripture was preceded by a breaking. Abraham had to leave everything familiar. Jacob had to wrestle until he limped. Joseph had to be betrayed and forgotten. Moses had to lose his confidence in the desert. David had to be hunted before he could be crowned. And each of them, in their own way, was being made, through pain, through patience, through surrender. They did not understand it fully in the moment, but the breaking was doing something permanent. It was giving them a foundation that success could not provide. It was giving them depth, and depth is what sustains calling. The man who has been broken begins to see life through different eyes. He no longer craves attention. He craves alignment. He no longer seeks validation. He seeks truth. He no longer chases position. He pursues purpose, because the making has taught him what really matters. It has stripped away the surface and shown him what lasts. And what lasts is not applause or possessions. What lasts is character, conviction, and calling. These things do not come cheap. They come through the breaking, and once they're there, they cannot be taken away easily, because they are not based on circumstance. They are rooted in a deeper identity. That identity is not found in what the man does, but in who he becomes through the process. The breaking reveals what was hidden, not just weakness, but also strength, not just failure, but also faith. The man who survives breaking begins to realize that what tried to destroy him actually defined him, that what was meant for evil, God used for good, not in theory, but in experience. He has walked through the fire and found that he was not alone. He has lost what he thought he needed and discovered what he truly had, and that discovery is what makes the man unshakable. The making is often invisible to others. People see the brokenness, the struggle, the silence. They don't see the shaping happening underneath. They don't see the roots going deeper, the muscles growing stronger, the resolve becoming firmer, but God sees. He sees every tear, every prayer, every moment of surrender. And he uses all of it. Nothing is wasted. Every setback is a setup. Every disappointment is a development. Every failure is forming something new. The breaking is not the end. It is the tunnel that leads to transformation. Sometimes the man being made doesn't even recognize himself anymore, and that is the point, because the old self could not carry the weight of the new purpose. The old mindset could not handle the new mission. The old habits could not survive in the new season. So God allowed the breaking to make room for what was coming. The making is not about returning to who the man was. It is about becoming someone he has never been. Someone God saw from the beginning. Someone forged in fire, refined in silence, and released in strength.